Good evening, or good morning, or good night, wherever you be. We're continuing on with book 4. This would be 4.3. Now, if you're interested in this content, just check out what my number is in the description. Send me a simple text that says, I would like info on book 4, and I will send you the book title and the author, so you too can read this for yourself. What physicists have never before considered worth investigating is now increasing at a very rapid rate. Action at a distance, apparently as a result of some type of mental activity, seems repeatedly the observed effect. When Uri Geller performed on TV, mentally bending metal and fixing clocks, there are often many kids who try to duplicate Uri's quote-unquote tricks. Sometimes the kids succeed. The number of children that can cause bends and breaks in metal and other materials just by wanting the break or bend to occur is increasing daily. Now, mind you, this book was written in 1984. Imagine what the numbers are now. Sometimes the kids succeed. The number of children that can cause bends and breaks in metal and other materials just by wanting the breaks or bend to occur is increasing daily. As previously mentioned, John Taylor, professor of mathematics at King's College, reports in his excellent book, Superminds, on the extensive tests run in England on several of these gifted children. If the Gellerizing children continue to increase in numbers and ability, the 1980s will see such fantasies of TV as My Favorite Martian, I Dream of Jeannie, and Bewitched becoming a part of reality. With controlled, repeatable experiments like those conducted by Taylor and by the Stanford Research Institute in the United States, we begin to have good solid data available for study. Gradually, we are moving into a position from which we can begin to create a science of quote-unquote magic. For that which has been called magic through the ages is now being performed at an ever-increasing rate, primarily by children. In the future, we may even find that this magic added to the curriculum of the sciences at universities. We're not quite there yet, but we certainly are closer than we were back in 1984 when this was written. In point of fact, the present disciplines of chemistry, physics, etc. are still basically magic to us, since we are still in the position of having no ultimate explanation of causality. Carla. One of the concepts most central to the system of study, which comes out of the research into the contactee messages offered by alleged UFO contact, is the concept of the immortality of our individual consciousness. There is a long mystical tradition extending back far beyond biblical times, which posits a type of immortal soul. St. Paul, in his epistles, has distinguished between the human body and the spiritual body. Long before St. Paul's century, Egyptian priests had the concept of the Ka, that's K-A, and posited that this Ka, or spiritual personality, existed after death and was the true repository of the essence of consciousness of the person who had lived in the life. Egyptians, of course, made very elaborate arrangements for life after death. If life after death is posited as probability, one may also posit life before birth. Any mother who has more than one child will testify to the undoubted fact that each child comes into his life or incarnation already equipped with a personality which cannot be explained by environment or heredity. After all the factors of both have been accounted for, there remains a unique personality with which the child seems to have been born. And thank the Father for that. Each child has certain fears which are not explainable in terms of the fears of the parents. A child, for instance, may be terrified of a thunderstorm. The rest of the family may be perfectly comfortable during such a storm. Another child may be extraordinarily gifted at playing of an instrument when neither parent nor any relative, as far back as the parents can remember, had musical ability. This brings us back to the serious consideration of reincarnation. According to the alleged UFO contact messages, reincarnation is one of the most important concepts to be grasped, for through it the universe functions in order to advance the evolution of mankind. This evolution is seen to be not only physical but also metaphysical, not only of the body but also of the spirit. And incarnations are seen in this system of philosophy to be opportunities for an individual to continue his evolution through the numerous and varied experiences. Although perhaps 2/3 of the world's population embraces or is familiar with the religious system which posits reincarnation, those of us of the Judeo-Christian culture are not as familiar with this concept. Nevertheless, Don's early investigation seemed to indicate that reincarnation was a probability and that incarnations contained situations, relationships, and lessons which were far more easily understood in the light of knowledge of previous incarnations. One succinct example of this relationship, no, I don't know what the word SUCCINCT means. Do you? Let's find out together. I often look words up, and whenever there's slight doubt, I often find that when I do look it up, it turns out I didn't have a friggin' clue what it actually was. So we learn together. Google Map? No, silly, just Google. Google. Thank you, Google, for that. And Kitty is shaking the camera because she wants in. Hi, Kina. Let's see. SUCCINCT. Especially of something written or spoken, briefly and clearly expressed. Succinct. Okay. God, I look like a ghost. Don't anybody write me that I look tired. It's Friday. I've worked all week. The weather change has occurred. But there is a cute kitty and she always looks the same no matter what. Okay. Although perhaps 2/3 of the world's population embraces or is familiar with the religious system which posits reincarnation, those of the Judeo-Christian culture are not as familiar with this concept. Nevertheless, Don's early investigation seemed to indicate that reincarnation was a probability and that incarnations contained situations, relationships, and lessons which were far more easily understood in the light of knowledge of previous incarnations. That word. Example of this relationship, which some are fond of calling karma, is that of a young boy who requests that his name not be used, who in this life had experienced such intense allergies to all living things that he could not cut the grass, could not smell the flowers, or during the blooming season spend much time at all outside. Under hypnotic regression, he experienced in detail a long life in England. And hello to Duncan if you're watching this. He's in England. He had been a solitary man whose nature was such as to avoid contact with any human being. He had inherited a fairly large estate and he spent his life upon it. His one pleasure was the very extensive garden that he maintained. In it, he had his gardeners plant all manners of flowers, fruits, and vegetables. Sounds amazing. After the life had been discussed, and while the lad was still in trance, hypnotist Lawrence Allison asked the boy, as he often did, to contact what is loosely referred to as his higher self. He had the boy ask his higher self if the lesson of putting people first and the other things second had been learned. The higher self said that indeed the lesson had been learned. The hypnotist then had the boy ask the higher self if this allergy could be healed, since the lesson had been learned and the allergy was no longer necessary. I have an allergy to nuts. What does that tell you? Insert joke here. The higher self agreed. The hypnotist then carefully brought the boy out of the hypnotic state and walked over to his piano on which he had placed a magnolia. As magnolia blossoms will do, it had dropped its pollen on the polished surface of the piano, and the hypnotist scraped the pollen onto his hand, took it over to the boy, and deliberately blew the pollen directly at the boy's nose. "How could you do that to me?" exclaimed the boy. "You know how allergic I am." "Oh, really?" asked the hypnotist. "I don't hear you sneezing." The boy remained cured of his allergy. When we attempt to consider our relationship with the universe, we begin to see that there is a great deal more in heaven and earth than has been dreamt of in most philosophies. Brownie points if you can state which Shakespeare show that was just quoted from. Ding, 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 ding. That would be Hamlet. It is an unbelievably gigantic universe, and we have a true relationship to it. We must ourselves be more than, or rather than, our daily lives seem to encompass. In the raw material, RA material, a good deal of information is discussed concerning our true relationship with the universe. But it is good to realize that we do have a long tradition of work upon what may perhaps most simply be called the magical personality. Never heard that one before. Magic is, of course, a much misused term and is mostly understood as being the art of... God, this guy keeps using some interesting words. The art of prestidigitation or illusion. Don't have to look that one up. So magic, of course, is a much misused term and is mostly understood as being an art of illusion. When one sees a magician, one accepts the fact that one is seeing very skillfully performed illusions. However, there is a study of the so-called magical personality which suggests that there is a thread which runs through our daily lives which we can grasp, and using that thread, remove ourselves from time to time into a framework of reference points in which we see reality as being that of the spiritual body, that of the personality which exists from incarnation to incarnation, and indeed since before the world was. By working upon this magical personality, by interiorizing experience, by accepting responsibility for all that occurs, by carefully analyzing our reactions to all that occurs, and by eventually coming to balance our reactions to all that occurs, so that our actions in our environment are generated within the self and are no longer simple reactions to outward stimuli. We strengthen the so-called magical personality until we are able to have some small claim to, quote, the art of causing changes in the consciousness at will, end quote. This is a classic definition of magic. Each time that a person sustains an unfortunate situation and reacts to it by not giving anger for anger or sadness for sadness, but instead offering compassion and comfort where none was expected, we strengthen that thread of inner strength within us, and we become more and more associated with a life that is closely related to the organic evolution of the universe. That is just beautiful. In this, it is some sense of the wholeness or organic nature of the universe which best informs the student of the UFO's purpose in being here. They have been here, by many accounts, for thousands of years. At least UFOs have been mentioned along with many other strange things sites in the annals of all early histories, including the Bible. Modern-day interest in UFOs can probably be fairly accurately dated from Kenneth Arnold's historic sighting over Mount Rainier in Washington, another early and historic sighting, also by an extremely reliable witness, is coincidentally connected with Don Elkins, and so I would choose the Mantell case of January 7th, 1948, instead of the Kenneth Arnold case of June 24th, 1947, for discussion. Thomas Mantell had trained as a pilot and had flown missions in Africa, Europe, and most notably, D-Day. In 1947, he was out of the Air Corps and had started the Elkins Mantell Flying School on Bowman Field in Louisville, Kentucky. In 1947, Don Elkins was a youthful student in this school. At about 2 o'clock in the afternoon on January 7th, 1948, the Kentucky State Police called Fort Knox and reported to the MPs that they had sighted a circular flying object moving rather quickly in their area. The MPs called the commanding officer at Godman Field at Fort Knox, and English is an interesting language, especially if you're ESL like me. Through due process, the flight service checked with Wright Field in Ohio to see if there were any experimental aircrafts which could explain the sighting. Wright Field had none flying. Meanwhile, the tower of Godman Field, Fort Knox, had already sighted this disc-shaped object both visually and on radar, and had made a report which was relayed quickly to the commanding officer. As it happened, 4 F-51s were in the area en route from Marietta, Georgia, near Atlanta, to Louisville, Kentucky. Since they were already airborne, and commanding officer of the Godman Field decided to contact the lead pilot and request that he investigate the UFO. The lead pilot was Captain Thomas Mantell. Mantell was given a radar vector from Godman Tower and moved towards the UFO. He sighted the object and stated that it was traveling slower than he was, and that he would close to take a look. Then Mantell informed the tower that the object was now above him, that it appeared to be metallic, and that it was tremendous in size. None of the 551s, including Mantell's, was equipped with oxygen. The other pilots leveled off at 15,000 feet. Mantell kept climbing. That was the last transmission from Captain Mantell. Minutes later, there was a telephone call stating that a plane had crashed. It was Captain Mantell's. His body lay near the wreckage. I could spend the length of the book attempting to give you a sketchy introduction to the thousands and thousands of sightings like Captain Mantell that involved irrefutably puzzling and concrete evidence of something highly strange occurring. There are many radar sightings of UFOs. There is one volume published by the Center of the UFO Studies of Evanston, Illinois, which deals solely with the numerous physical trances that UFOs had left behind. Physical traces that UFOs had left behind, either by irradiating the soil, causing other changes in soil composition, or leaving the impression in the ground. A computer set up by this same organization to carry a program of information regarding UFOs contained well over 80,000 reports. And some things become startlingly clear by the use of UFO CAT, the computer. For instance, it is now possible if one measures a landing trace from a UFO sighting to find out from the computer what the probable description of the UFO itself will be. Thus, in a way, the witness is merely confirming what the computer already knows. However, this is an introduction to a book which consists of transcripts of messages of a very precise nature having to do with metaphysics, philosophy, and the plan of evolution, both physical and spiritual, of man on earth. Consequently, what I propose to do is share with you some of the research material which our group has collected through the years. Since all of these examples come from the same group, we never described who the receiver may be, as we feel that it is information that is important rather than the person who is transmitting. According to an entity called Hanton, that's Hatonn, who has spoken with our group and several others for many years, the purpose in being here at the least some of the UFOs that are seen in our skies at this time is much like the purpose that we might have in sending aid to a disaster-stricken or extremely impoverished country. It is a desire to be of service. We have been contacting people of the planet Earth for many, many of your years. We have been contacting at intervals of thousands of years those who sought our aid. It is time for many of the people of this planet to be contacted, for many now have the understanding and the desire to seek something outside the physical illusion that has for so many years involved the thinking of those of this planet. The process we are stimulating is one which is self-generating. As more and more of those who desire our contact receive it and pass it on to others, then those who receive this passed on information will then themselves be able to reach a state of thinking and understanding sufficiently in tune, shall I say, with their vibrations in order to receive our contact. For this, my friends, is how contacts work. It is first necessary, if the entity is to be able to receive our contact, for him to become of a certain vibration as a result of his thinking. This is greatly speeded by involvement in groups such as this. And then it is finally done through meditation. In other words, the verbal communication given to the entity by the channels, such as this one, create a system of thought and desire for spiritual awareness that raises his vibration. We of the Confederation of Planets in the service of the Infinite Creator are very sorry that we cannot step upon your soil and teach those of the people who desire our service. But, my friends, as we have said before, this would be a very great disservice to those who do not desire our service at this time, and we are afraid we would have little effect in bringing understanding even to those who desire it, for understanding, my friends, comes from within. We can only guide, we can only suggest. We are attempting to do this in such a way that the seeking of the individual will be stimulated to turning this thinking inward to that single source of love and understanding. The Creator, that is part of us all, part of everything that exists, for everything that exists, my friends, is the Creator. We are very privileged to have you join us in this great service at this time in the history of your planet, for this is a very great time, a great transitional period in which many of the Earth's people will be raised from their state of confusion to a simple understanding, the love of their Creator. Hanton speaks of our desire to seek something outside the physical illusion, that what he talks about so persuasively in something is something that is often referred to by members of the Ra, called the Confederation of Planets in the service of the Infinite Creator, as the original thought, quote unquote. This is another term for our word love. The original thought equals love. I like it. It makes sense. This is another term for our word love, but implies a great deal more. The original thought. It implies a unity that is so great that we do not see each other simply as close friends or brothers and sisters, but ideally as the Creator. And as we see each other and ourselves as the Creator, we see one thing. This concept is at the very heart of telepathy, and Hanton talks about this concept and the original thought in general thusly. Quote, "At this time I am in a craft far above your place of dwelling. I am at this time able to monitor your thoughts. This, my friends, might seem to some of your peoples to be an infringement, but I can assure you that it is not. Our capabilities of knowing the thinking of the peoples of this planet Earth are not designed in any way to infringe upon either their thinking or their activities. We do not consider the knowledge of the thoughts of others to be an infringement, for we see the thoughts as our own. We see these thoughts as the thoughts of the Creator. My friends, it may seem to you that a thought of a nature other than one of love and brotherhood might be a thought generated not of our Creator. This is not possible, my friends. Although that is generated is generated by the Creator, all things that are generated by the Creator. He's all things and is in all places. And all of the consciousness and all of the thought that exists is the thought of our Creator. His infinite number of parts all have free will, and all may generate in any way that they choose. All of his parts communicate with all of the creation and his entire infinite sense. We are not attempting to change the thinking of our Creator. We are only attempting to bring his ideas to some of the more isolated parts of their inspection and appraisal. For their inspection and appraisal. Isolated parts, I say, my friends, and why should we consider these parts to be isolated? We consider them isolated because from our point of view, they have chosen to wander far from the concepts that we have found to penetrate most of the parts of the creation with which we are familiar. We find, my friends, that man upon planet Earth in his experiences and experiments has become isolated in his thinking and has divorced it from that which we are accustomed in the vast reaches of creation which we have experienced. I urge you, my friends, to remember what we have brought to you. The next time that you are, shall we say, backed into a corner by the circumstances which prevail within the illusion of your physical existence, remember what we have learned and do not forget what you have worked so hard to obtain. You will choose at any time to alter your needs and desires from within the physical illusion to your being within the creation of the Father. As long as your objectives lie within this physical illusion, it will be necessary for you to be subject to the laws which prevail within this illusion. If your desires can be altered by the application of what you are learning and are lifted in the creation of the Infinite One, then, my friends, you may have a great deal more ability to remove yourself from the corners into which the illusion seems to back you. Pretty incredible things, guys. Pretty incredible. Well then, we shall have book 4.4 sometime in the next following days. I love you guys. May this find you happy, healthy, and joyously more enlightened. I love you guys. Good night.